Hello, my name is Seymour Kazimirski. I host a show called Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. Last week, I had a commentary called Israel, the Arab World, and the Solution. I was shocked at how many answers to emails and texts and phone calls that I had to do. It's obviously a very, very controversial topic. If you watch the commentary, it was very one-sided. I admit, I'm all behind Israel. I am Jewish. My parents survived the Holocaust, although they lost 65 members of their family. So for me, it's very important to have a homeland. But the coverage that we're seeing on the news, it's very important to realize how one-sided it is, how sensational the news is, how hypocritical the news is. Let me ask you a question. How much have you seen of what's happening in Syria? Think about it for a minute. Over 500,000 people killed. Have you seen the coverage in Syria about their devastation, about their loss of life? How about Iraq? How about Libya? How about Nigeria? I could go on and on. Yet there is some sort of fascination about showing what's happening in the Israeli-Arab war. I'm not saying I'm 100% right. I deplore what has been happening in Israel, in the Gaza, and what's happened in Israel as well. But more important than that is we all have to take a step back and realize that this fighting isn't just from the last 2 weeks. It's been going on for a very long time. I think the hardest word to define is peace. What does peace really mean? To Israel, they want to live with their neighbors. They don't want rockets coming in. They don't want tunnels dug. They don't want a neighbor that says, my whole job is to kill Jews. That's not right. Very, very difficult. On the Gaza side, I believe that most of the people in Gaza want to live. They want to live with their neighbors as well. But when you have elected a party like Hamas, and you say, I want you to put me in power, and my whole platform is I will drive the Jews into the sea. That's not a good way to start a peace negotiations. And that's why it has been so difficult. So for all the emails I got that said, thank you, Seymour, for bringing this up, and for all of you who disagree with me, I believe in disagreement and I understand your side, but please take a step back and just think about what is really happening over there. Understand that Gaza is not an occupied state. Gaza was given to the Palestinians. Gaza was given to them in 2006, and yet we've had nothing but war since then. 10,000 rockets? That's a lot of rockets. I think if it were you or me, we would want to be sure that if that's going to be the case of a neighborhood that we're going to be in, we better be prepared. We better have a good defense, and we better have a good offense. Some people ask me, how would you like to live in Gaza, Seymour? And you know what I say to them? And I've written many emails to that fact. I wouldn't like to live in Gaza. Not because of where it is today, but because I would have never voted in a party like Hamas that has a single goal, one single goal, destroy Israel. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, and I want to introduce you to my guest. This is Rachel Glanstein. Rachel, welcome to Seymour's World.
Thank you, Seymour.
We didn't come here to talk about the Israeli-Arab war, but prior to the show, we did talk for a few minutes, and I was so interested in your perspective. So before we get into your parliamentary work and everything that you're doing, tell me a little bit about your perspective. I understand that you are not an atheist, but you are anti-religion.
Yeah, I was born Jewish, so my parents are Jewish, and I saw a number of the online petitions come about asking me to sign to get Israel to stop sending all their military to Gaza. And I was close to signing it, but then I thought, I don't know the history of this, and maybe I should read a little bit on the history before I go putting my name out there into something that I might not agree with. And sure enough, my father actually sent me an article explaining more of the history, explaining the history of the tunnels and why that's important. And I definitely learned a lesson. We can't go off half-cocked, so to speak, and pass judgment on things that we don't understand. I think it's really important that we study the history, or else we will end up repeating it.
Well, that's very, very good, because I can see why you have a job as a parliamentarian. You speak very well. Excellent, as a matter of fact. And I appreciate that fact coming from someone who is anti-religious. And that's very, very important, because a lot of people have to understand that this is not a religious war. It has nothing to do with a religious war. It is truly a war of people who want to have peace in their land. So let's finish that topic. And before we talk about your job and what you do in this world, because I find it fascinating, I want to welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii, Zuri. Zuri is spelled Z-U-R-I. She is one of the most beautiful young women I have met as a producer of our show. She's replacing Ian Davidson. Ian, I say aloha and goodbye to you. I want to wish you well in your future endeavors. I know you'll probably be producing Hawaii Five-0 or some big fancy show one of these days. But Zuri has joined us, and Zuri, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii and Seymour's World.
Thank you, and aloha.
There you go. That's terrific. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Rachel. Rachel, what do you do? Because I had no idea what you do as a parliamentarian.
So a lot of people don't know what a parliamentarian is. A parliamentarian is usually an expert on some manual of parliamentary procedure. I'm a part of the National Association of Parliamentarians, and our chosen parliamentary authority is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. So we're experts on that. What we do is we advise the president or the chair of a meeting on the proper procedure to running a meeting. We can also occasionally give teaching presentations on how to behave yourself as a member, how to make motions properly, and other things that relate to a meeting context or rule context. We also help people to interpret the rules that govern their organizations, such as bylaws, and mainly advice on how to run meetings.
So before you started in this is a pretty serious business, because I know as a business consultant I do that a lot, and I go into board meetings and I help mediate and arbitrate and do all the things that are necessary to do it. Most people call me when there's conflict and I have to do some type of resolution. But in your case, it's to help them run the meetings.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, Seymour.
No.
But I will say that most of the time we're not called when everyone's happy. We're called when there is indeed a conflict, when they expect some sort of controversial item to come up, or when there's a small but vocal group of individuals who want to say certain things or get certain things done. Then that's a lot of times either we're called by the people running the meeting, holding the meeting, or the people in the audience who want our assistance to make sure that they make their objections noted in the minutes and for court a lot of times as well.
Very good. So Rachel, are you a local girl?
I am. I was born and raised here. I'm the tiniest bit Hawaiian, although to look at me, you would never know. I stay out of the sun as much as possible. But yeah, and I love being here. I love being here.
And you went to school at?
I did graduate from Punahou High School, and I can thank President Obama for making that a very popular place. But I'm very grateful to the education that I received there. I would put it on par with college.
I have to tell you, I can't believe how many people know Punahou because of President Obama, because most people in our audience that are not from Hawaii really had no idea when I said Punahou. But now Punahou is obviously very well known.
Yeah.
So your job, is it at the state level? Do you work at all with the politicians at all?
I do have my own business, where I'm a parliamentary consultant, and I either go and advise the president or the chair during a meeting, or I run the meeting myself, depending on what the client wants. That is done outside of my 9-to-5 working hours. We do end up getting involved in politics because most of my clients are condominium associations and community associations, which are in Hawaii heavily governed by state law. And so what I've seen in the past 10 years of me practicing as a professional parliamentarian is that it greatly matters what the legislature does when it comes to our business. So we have to pay attention and make sure that we lobby appropriately to both prevent bad bills from becoming law and to encourage good bills into becoming law.
What made you want to be in this business? I'm just curious.
I'm very lucky because my father is Steve Glanstein, and those of you in the know probably recognize his name because I consider him to be the supreme parliamentarian of Hawaii, like similar to the Supreme Court, only he's the supreme parliamentarian. He's actually been a professional registered parliamentarian since 1984, I believe, when we lived in a condominium association. And he had someone waving around a book of procedure, and my dad is the kind of guy who said, oh, I need to learn that. And he did indeed. He learned it. He became a professional registered parliamentarian. He took control of that condominium association, and he hasn't stopped since. I'm very lucky. Because of the work that he's done since the 80s, I don't market myself at all. People call us. We don't have to do any sort of advertising.
And what was there must have been some impetus for you to get into this job. I mean, there were other opportunities, obviously, besides being a model.
Thank you very much, Seymour.
Go ahead.
So I went to college briefly on the mainland, but I was studying social work, and I had this feeling that I was going to burn out doing that. So I came home, and my dad does not suffer fools. He does not suffer laziness either. So he said, you get a job, or you go to school here, or you can study this book of parliamentary procedure. I'm sure he threw that in there thinking there's no way she's ever going to be interested. But I studied it and I became very interested. And I felt very empowered after reading what was in there because it tells you exactly how to behave at meetings properly and how to get what you want done. And that's the goal, really, to get what you want done properly. Majority rules, but the minority has the right to be heard.
You know, probably 90% of the people that are watching this show have been involved in some type of dispute, whether it's a condo dispute or a personal dispute, etc. Do you work with just corporations, or do you work with politicians? Do you work with individuals?
We seem to mainly work with corporations such as condominium associations and community associations. There are 1,600 condominium associations.
How many?
1,600 in Hawaii. And new ones are being planned every day. So there's always opportunity for growth. We do occasionally work with law firms. Sometimes they will ask us, they might have a client who wants to get a certain objection noted because maybe pending litigation. So we'll work with the law firm on how to make sure that it's done properly. Occasionally, we've actually gotten some referrals from different politicians, but usually, again, it relates to community associations, condos. I occasionally will serve nonprofit associations. I've gotten the opportunity to work with the nurses. There's a parliamentarian that works with us that greatly works with the Democratic Party here as well. So there is some involvement with politics and our parliamentary organizations.
Rachel, I'm very interested in the direct link between politics and these community associations. Has the law been going towards the association, or is it more on the owner's side?
That's a really tough question, Seymour. I would say that you have a little bit of both. Sometimes these laws get created because the legislators don't understand how these associations work. I'll give you an example. For condominium associations, we got a law passed a few years ago to make it very clear how to remove board members. But we left the law different for community associations. And the reason is that for community associations, you usually have a much larger group of people, at least often you do, and a lot of them might not be able to get to the meeting. I'll give you an example, Mililani Town. They had thousands, over 10,000 members. So there's a very small chance that 10,000 members will ever show up at a meeting. So the rules have to be slightly different for them. I would say that the legislature does try to protect the rights of the individual owner, make sure that they can get access to information about their own association, which they are absolutely entitled. But they also need to protect the process to make sure that the board of the organization can still get the business accomplished. They have a fiduciary duty to make sure that the business is accomplished.
Well, one of the biggest issues that have come up lately is public disclosure. And I know from the boards that I am on, I'm very, very sensitive about that issue. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about that, because I think that's probably primary in a lot of people's minds, whether they want to join a board or not.
Absolutely.
Right? We're going to be back with Rachel Glanstein. This is Seymour Kazimirski on Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day,
host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii. We're here with Rachel Glanstein. She has a acronym PRP, which stands for Parliamentary, right?
Professional Registered Parliamentarian.
Okay, I didn't get it right the first time. Professional Registered Parliamentarian. My God, you couldn't just say something like business consultant or anything like that. All right, we ended the last session with something that I think is very important, and that's called public disclosure. I, as an individual, want to know, if I'm in a condo, that the board members are representing me. But if the board member has a personal interest in the condo, rather than just having one unit, he may own 10 units, or he may be extremely wealthy and he could be a developer and all that. What's happening with that here in Hawaii?
Well, Hawaii does have conflict of interest rules that relate to condominium associations and community associations, where if you feel that you have a conflict of interest, you need to disclose it. It doesn't necessarily prevent you from voting, but what I've seen is that most people, they really do police themselves. At least on my own condominium board, we had a situation where our board president, her brother also owns a unit in the building, and so she actually recused herself on the motion itself, the discussion, and the voting on it. So I find board members to be pretty conscientious of their duties when it comes to declaring a conflict of interest.
Do you believe that, let's say in boards now, in all boards, that there should be public disclosure on financial conditions?
That's a tough question, because that recent law that was enacted by the state legislature that required that, and we did see a number of people resign from the board, which I can understand, because I personally don't want my financial information out there. However, I do feel that there should be some disclosure, at least in what areas I may earn money. If you see that I earn money from a developer, for example, you might not want to hire me as a parliamentarian if the developer is still involved in that association. Right. And that's something that should absolutely be disclosed before any money changes hands, before you give me any confidential information.
So the state really didn't solve the problem, because by saying you have to have open public disclosure, you're getting so many people resigning from the Board of Regents, from UH, from all sorts of boards, actually. And I happen to agree with that. I don't believe that I have to disclose, especially if I'm not being paid for it, I shouldn't have to disclose my personal information and let it out for everybody to see. So is there an answer in your mind? How do you distinguish it?
I think they could have revealed the areas, but redacted all the income information.
Well, that's a good
and
idea.
I think I would have been completely comfortable with that. But even though the income information is provided in brackets, to me that's still too personal to be let out there. But I think that, again, the areas of possible conflict are very important. And a lot of people don't realize what you just said is true, and that most board members aren't paid. It's a completely volunteer position. So if you beat up on your volunteers, they're just not going to volunteer anymore.
A matter of fact, and I'm not scaring any of you to not join boards, but there has been some very volatile boards here in this state. I know one for a fact in which the president of the board had eggs thrown at his front door and death threats and all that kind of stuff. It can really get a little bit difficult for somebody to say, what am I doing here? And there's really no protection against that.
A home is usually the largest investment that most people will make. So unlike other organizations where it's voluntary, you go to your church organization, you choose to go there. If you have a problem with them, you can choose to join a different church. Whereas with homes, most people don't have the financial resources to just say, oh, I can sell this apartment and just buy a new one. A lot of people don't have that available to them. So they take it very seriously, which is completely understandable. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of reminding people that there are two separate things. There's the issue and there's the personality. And you keep personalities out of it entirely. You stick with the issue. I've seen a couple of bad board members that were truly bad. However, not very many. On the whole, I find that most board members are just a lot of times misguided Maybe they follow incorrect advice from the professionals, or they ignore the professionals, which is not usually a good response, or they feel that their association is not financially able to hire professionals. And honestly, it's just safer to pay the professionals to get the correct advice.
Right. I believe that people should get more involved, and at all levels, from politics, which is, I think, the highest level of involvement that you could get, all the way down to your individual board level. And it's very, very important that people understand that if you want to get things done, and if you want to have your voice heard, you have to do something about it. Because otherwise, don't blame them afterwards. It's too late. You have to be willing to stand up and say your piece. It may be your opinion, but be willing to say it. Otherwise, it really doesn't work. I have found that I will not join boards unless I see that a board is a fully functioning board, not just a fundraising board to raise money for the individual company that they're working with. But for me, it's more important to make sure that they're fully functioning, that they have the right mix of a board. And I presume that's what you help them with, is it?
I give it a shot. I'm a big believer in the saying, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. So it's fine to point out everything that a board is doing wrong, but if you're not willing to step up and try to fix the errors, then I kind of think that after you point it out, move along. It's pointless to keep pointing it out without having any sort of solutions whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So I admit, I expect a lot out of board members, even though I realize that they are volunteers. But I think that at least if they put some effort, it's something.
Cool. What's the best part of your job? What do you love doing?
I get to tell people what to do for a living. I'm 35 years old, and most of the people that I help are in their 50s or 60s, and I do get to tell them what to do, and I get paid for that, and they usually do it. It's very exciting. But honestly, I love being an expert in something. It's really fun to know the rules and to know how to use them appropriately. I find it, as I said earlier, extremely empowering.
And do you also do conflict resolution? Are there areas where you have a board of 10 or 12 people and you're right in the middle of it?
Yes, I would say that's a huge part of my job. There have actually been times where I've been hired to basically be a mediator as well, because there's meetings, which is what parliamentary procedure was developed to handle. But I've also been hired to run something called a forum, for example, where there's one big controversial issue, like I can think of one, a pipe refitting project. So we're talking about a number of millions of dollars and very high special assessments to each individual owner. So what's intelligent in those situations is to call a forum. So it's not a formal meeting where you need to have a motion and all that. The forum is so that way people can discuss, get their concerns out there, and try to get their questions answered. And a lot of times I mediate at those sort of things to go between the board, who may have made these decisions that the homeowners are not happy with, and if the professionals, maybe the contractors show up as well, then we kind of mediate between those three parties. So I do enjoy the conflict resolution part.
You know, maybe you should start working at UH. They seem to have a bunch of issues that need to be resolved, and somebody to help them understand what's going on. I have a great story to tell you. I have a client in California that I go to, and I'm there for the board meetings, and there was a mediation issue between two partners in a business. And we're sitting in their boardroom, and unfortunately their boardroom was a very long board table, and I'm sitting at the head, and I have the president on one side, and I have the vice president on the other side. And these guys, one was maybe 6'6" and 350 pounds, and the other one was 6'6", 6'5", another two big German guys, and they were in the food business. I won't mention their names. And when you're mediating, and all of a sudden things get heated, and the two guys stand up and start looking like they're going to throw blows at each other, you start to ask yourself, what am I doing here again?
Am I getting paid enough to be here to take this kind of abuse?
It was close. It was really amazing. Do you have any experiences like that?
Absolutely. I find that in parliamentary procedure, usually it'll be a larger meeting, and you have to stand in order to be recognized and in order to speak. So I'm used to people standing. However, I absolutely don't allow finger pointing. And the reason is I found that as soon as someone points their finger, it becomes a personality instead of an issue. And we need to move it away from that. So as soon as I see something like that happen, I immediately make sure I'm standing, tell the person to be seated, explain to them how they need to stay away from the personality and focus on the issue. Like with those two gentlemen, wait, back up here. Let's focus on what we need to be talking about, not our personal issues with each other. So a lot of times I've been lucky in that reminding people of what's proper has actually gotten them to behave. One of the things that I really can't stand is when I was watching some of the public hearings on TV related to the Native Hawaiian issues, I couldn't stand people interrupting each other. Because when I've been mediator or when I've been running the meeting, I'm very careful to not allow anyone to interrupt. And a lot of times when someone interrupts, it is because they feel very passionate and you feel for them. However, you can't allow them to interrupt because as soon as one person interrupts, more people interrupt. And then it's not clear who has control of the meeting. As soon as I hear an interruption, excuse me, you'll get your chance to speak. Let's finish listening to the speaker that currently has the floor, and then we'll take you next. So that way people know that they have the right to speak. They just need to hold it until the current person is done talking.
Excellent advice. So before we take our next break, I have to ask you a question. Are you married to your job? Or are you looking for, because I could use you at Global Consulting Company. You obviously do very, very good work. And some of the things that you do are part and parcel of not an education that you've had. It's the work experience that you've had that has taught you that. Very, very good.
I'd say it's both.
Both? Great. What are some of your best experiences?
My best experiences are usually I'll get an email maybe really late in the evening or early the next morning telling me, thank you so much. Here's what happened after you left. We were able to work out our issues. Let's book you for next year. It's such a great feeling, and especially because, wow, I helped. And they felt it was worth the money. My greatest experience was one of the neighbor island ones. A lot of times we will get the money up front because we aren't right in their face to collect later. And so we'll give them an estimate of our time. And so one of the neighbor island meetings, I went there and I managed to get their meeting done pretty efficiently. And so I was able to send them a refund of what they had sent us, and they actually sent it back. And they said I was worth it and that I should just keep the extra, which was just so touching. For me, the compliment is a lot more important than the money that I get.
Pass that client on to me, please. I like those guys. Well, when we send retainer bills out to clients for meetings and things like that, very seldom do we have anybody that sends it.
Non-refundable usually, too.
Yes, absolutely. Tell me some more. Do you have any other great experiences that you've had? You told me something about when people ask you for certain days.
Oh, okay. I've been very lucky. When I've done a good job and maybe 1 or 2 years running, I'll actually have the occasional client book me in perpetuity, which is very nice because some clients will always have their meeting on a certain day out of every year, like the 4th Thursday in March, for example. And then they'll just say, can you just put the 1st Thursday in March down for us forever? Which is so touching. Because then to them, even though they might not have a problem next year or the year after, they're so satisfied with how their meetings are getting run and how efficiently they're accomplishing their business according to the rules that they just want me at every meeting, which is fantastic.
That is great, Rachel. I'm so glad to hear it. You're doing a great job. We have to take another break, and then we're going to come back with not the best experiences, but some of the worst experiences you've had. This is Seymour Kazimirski with Rachel Glanstein. This is Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where it's a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m.
Hi, welcome back to Seymour's World. I'm Seymour Kazimirski. We're having such a great time here today with Rachel Glanstein. When I first met Rachel, I said, okay, she's a PRP. What is a PRP? And of course, I had to look it up, and I realized that she's a professional registered parliamentarian. What is a professional registered parliamentarian? And I thought I knew a lot about business and what goes on, but finding out what she does and what your dad did before you has been really wonderful. To know that there's people out there who can help mediate, arbitrate, run a board professionally, make sure that meetings are done professionally. I just wish we could do more of that with our politicians, because they are such glad-handers, and a lot of them are just microphone huggers, if you know what I mean by that term. You know, they just love to hold on to that microphone and get their picture in the paper and all that. It really needs somebody who can help them understand what their job really is.
Yeah.
So we ended up with some great personal experiences you had on the last session. Tell us about some of the ones that weren't so great.
Well, when I first started in 2004, I went to one meeting that they had been a longtime client of my father's. And I was unfortunate enough to have an outgoing president that was not happy with the board or the organization. And so he used his president's report to say a number of very controversial things. Unfortunately, there's no time limit on the president's report, and they didn't adopt a time limit. So I was pretty powerless. I wasn't running the meeting. I was simply serving as an advisor to this controversial president. So there's nothing I could do, and I just remember hearing in the audience calls of, "Where's Steve?" for my father.
Oh.
And so that was a moment that I just said, wow, do I really want to do this? Do I really, really want to do this? And what it taught me is I definitely need to know everything that could come up at the meeting. And now I always ask the president that I'm serving with for a copy of his or her report before the meeting to make sure it's not controversial.
Yes, we do that as normal course of events. It's like having financials and all that stuff in front of you so that you know you're not looking at them for the first time in the meeting. That's excellent. What a good lesson.
Exactly.
What about the job itself? Is there room for more parliamentarians? Because we have so many young people out there looking for different kind of work.
We are always looking for more parliamentarians.
Oh.
Right now, there's only 3 professional registered parliamentarians in the state of Hawaii. We would like to add more to our number. It does take some schooling, but a lot of it can be done by self-study. And we are absolutely willing to help and educate anyone that wants to learn and join our organization and earn those certifications.
What are the qualifications?
So in order to become a registered parliamentarian, well, first, to join the organization, you just pay the dues, and there's a simple test that you need to pass. And we do hold classes to help people to pass that initial test to become a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. After that step, you can become a registered parliamentarian, and that involves really reading the book and understanding every part of it, because that test is made up with a number of multiple choice questions that deal with exactly what's in the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And it also gives you 5 quotes from the book that you have to look up and know where they are. So you have to write down the page number. You have to be able to find the excerpts.
So what is the educational requirement?
There's none.
There's
Just read the book.
So really?
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
And
Self-study.
is the pay fairly decent?
Once you get to the next step to become a professional registered parliamentarian, that means that you've now been tested on presiding, on serving as a parliamentarian, on teaching, on opinion writing and interpreting bylaws. There's absolutely payment that's involved. We charge $150 an hour, and I find that people are absolutely willing to pay. Some people have told us that we don't charge enough. So I think that it's definitely worth it. And the amount of study that you put into is very important. We do have to renew our certifications every 6 years. So you can be satisfied that a professional registered parliamentarian does continue their education.
Wow. For those of you, especially my mentoring students who are out there, here is something we always talk about. You know, what is different? Something that you could do. I can tell you from my personal experience, and also I'm sure you feel the same way, there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction and gratification from leading a good meeting. People truly appreciate what you're doing because you're a professional in something that they can't do on their own. So if there is that much work out there, and it can be had and you can get well paid for it by the sound of what you're saying, it's something that you should look at. Where do they go to look for it?
I would recommend going first to www.hsap.org.
Let's repeat it, hsap.org.
Yeah, and that is the website for the Hawaii State Association of Parliamentarians. You can find some information on there. We also have some free information, so you can just educate yourself on how to write minutes, how to run a better meeting. You can also go to www.parliamentarians.org.
Yes,
Yes, with an S on the end, and that's our national website. So there's also some information available on how to join. And you can always contact one of us. My email is available on the hsap.org website, so you can email me at any time. We'd love to have people join our organization and further their education. We find that the more people know about parliamentary procedure, the more they actually hire us. A lot of people have this idea that if they hold the knowledge to themselves, it'll increase their value, their stock. But we found the exact opposite to be true. The more we get the knowledge out there, the more people actually call us and hire us.
Let's talk politics for a minute, because I think, you know, we have an election coming up very soon. Are some of the legislators and some of the politicians that we have, are they pro what you do? Do they see that as a necessary part of their being able to move forward in their careers as politicians?
That's tough. Unfortunately, I'd have to say no for a lot of them. Some of them have been very helpful to us. They do listen, and when we actually proposed some legislation this year, they helped us to make sure it actually got through, which was really good because we cleaned up a couple parts of the condominium law. Very nice. But I'd have to say that I think a lot of them, they don't see the complete value as it relates to what they do as legislators. They might see the value when it comes to condos, when it comes to other kinds of organizational meetings. But I don't think they see the power yet when it comes to the legislature. So I would like to see a parliamentarian job for the state legislature. I think that would be fantastic.
An excellent idea.
I suggested one for city council, but you know, it's hard with the budgets being tight. They don't want to create any new positions, which I completely understand. So it's, you know, it's something I keep saying.
But if we listen to Governor Abercrombie, we're swimming in money right now. So, you know, it's
what the state says.
Yeah. No, I think it's very true. I would love to see a little bit more parliamentarian principles and structure in the way politics is run today, because too much of it is just, it's nonsense. We don't see enough fact coming out of what's going on.
It's a lot of finger pointing too.
A lot of that, and it's at all levels. You know, we could go to the federal government and say the same thing.
Yeah,
but
don't get me started.
But we're talking about Hawaii, and in Hawaii, that's something we could really do. I think it's important, not just in the private sector, but I think in the public sector as well.
Something that we actually pushed for was we occasionally will work with the State Department of Education, and we'll put on little presentations for the students that run their local governments or run their little like organizational groups. But I would like to see a class. I mean, it doesn't have to be required, but an elective similar to debate, for example, to teach students the basics of parliamentary procedure. And the reason is that people have been meeting in groups since there have been people. And so clearly it's very helpful to have this knowledge about how to meet properly in groups.
You say that, and it reminds me when I go to schools and talk to schools, I make them follow rules of etiquette of a board meeting. And you know, when they want to say something, they have to stand up. And when you get high school kids and college kids, they're just used to sitting in their chair and opening their mouth, and all of a sudden they have to stand up and address me properly and do. And after a while, they respect it.
Absolutely.
And they really start to understand that there's a process, a structure, a discipline that makes it all worth it. I think that's very important. What about some of your hobbies? We haven't even talked about you personally.
I have a lot of hobbies. I'm kind of a varied individual. I love to read. I actually recently, well, a couple years ago, I really got into working out, and I love it. We converted our second bedroom into a workout room, which my uncle has a great name for it, the No Excuses Room. So we go with that.
I like that.
I love to walk around. I love going to Waikiki and kind of eyeing out the tourists and the locals, seeing how they interact. I like to study human behavior. I find it very interesting. I very much enjoy playing video games. I'm a
Wait a second, video games?
I do.
Really?
I don't have as much time as I
Are you
used
into
to.
the death stuff and the
But
killing and
Not as much, although I find that it's very cathartic. People think somehow that it increases the violence factor, but I feel that it actually decreases. When I'm upset, go kill some Nazis with my old school Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, and I just feel so much better.
No kidding.
Yeah, so people discount it, but I think that those are the people that just don't understand what purpose the games serve.
And what about other organizations? You don't just work all day. What else are you involved in?
I'm also the secretary for my condominium association. It's more of a
course.
volunteer. I'm secretary for the Hawaii State Association of Parliamentarians. In the past, I've done some things at the national level. I try to keep it more to things behind the scenes. I don't really like being out there in front of everyone, which is funny because I do love to run meetings, which definitely makes me out there in front of everyone. But two different things, I think.
Now, before you came on here, you said you were a little nervous to be on television, but you have done such a great job. Did you just relax, or are you used to it from being in front of people, in front of boards?
That's tough. I do have paralyzing stage fright. But what I found is by learning the rules of procedure and learning how to run meetings properly and respect everyone present and get that same respect in return, that I'm a lot more comfortable handling the public speaking once I get there. It's the hump to get over it, but as soon as I'm there, it all kind of recedes and I'm comfortable with my knowledge.
Wow. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I always like to end up with this question. What do you want people to know about you that they don't know already from this interview?
A lot of people are really shocked when they find out that I love pro wrestling. I love it. I didn't watch it for most of my life.
Wait a second. Pro wrestling?
Yes, absolutely, pro wrestling.
The guys who fake?
The guys who wrestle in their underwear, do all sorts of things,
underwear
you know?
thing. Now I understand.
Absolutely, absolutely. My boyfriend, when we met over 12 years ago, he said, you know, your problem is you just don't understand it. That's why you don't like it. I'm like, sure, I'm sure that's it, with my eye rolls and everything. But he helped me to understand it, and he helped me to understand how it is choreographed indeed. We don't like the word fake, of course, because real injuries do happen, and it does hurt. Falling on your back repeatedly is going to hurt, unless you're falling on pillows. The ring is not a pillow. There's actually wooden slats underneath.
Have you been to a match?
Unfortunately, here our wrestling options are very limited. But when the main company, the World Wrestling Entertainment, came here a couple times, we go to all their shows, their live shows when they come here, because their live shows are very exciting. You'll never feel an energy like you feel in those crowds. It's amazing. I think it's because it combines athletics with comedy and drama. It's the perfect combination of everything.
It's
New shows
then.
Every week, no reruns. It's pure entertainment. It's fantastic.
It's entertainment. What about the MMA stuff?
Oh, I also love mixed martial arts.
Oh my God.
I really love it. Same idea. There can be beauty in it, but I do prefer pro wrestling because I prefer my violence to be staged. You know?
Good point.
I don't mind it being controlled with MMA, but staged is fantastic.
Good point. Excellent point. Well, your boyfriend is Colin, am I correct?
Yeah.
Colin, I hope you watch the show. Your girlfriend has given us an insight into why she likes men in underwear. So,
well said.
Thank you. We are just about at the end of our show, and I do want to say thank you to everybody who's made this possible. Again, a fond aloha to Ian and Zuri. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you here. Next week, we have a show with Nick Smallwood. Those of you who don't know Nick Smallwood, he runs one of the largest transportation companies here in Hawaii, and he has a past that he's not afraid to talk about. And we will find out more about Nick next week. Meanwhile, let me say thank you very much, Rachel. It's been wonderful having you here.
Same here.
I've learned so much about this area that I had nothing, and I sort of think of myself as knowing a lot about a little things, you know. But it's been a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you, Seymour.
Aloha from Seymour's World. I'm Seymour Kazimirski at ThinkTech Hawaii.